Hello, I'm Wayne from Rodney Illustrations, creator of the Global Fusion Intuitive Tarot, and today I have the esteemed pleasure of interviewing my dear friend and fellow mystic, Henry Shelton, founder of Assure Coaching. We dive into his origins here in Dallas, Texas, his awakening moment in distant lands overseas, and his subsequent call to action to be of service to others. I hope you enjoy.
Hey, Andrew, how you doing?
I'm good, Wayne. Thanks.
Thank you for being here and for doing this interview. As I mentioned earlier, this is something that I've been wanting to do for several years. I've always been inspired by your business and spiritual acumen. So it's a pleasure for me to have you as a guest on this series. Thank you for doing that.
Well, I feel honored. Thank you.
So for almost 2 decades now, I've known you, and service to others has always been at the center of your compass. Can you introduce yourself, please, and share a little bit of your life's journey and all of the main events that have led you to this current moment in time with your mission and the transformation?
Sure. Wow. So I grew up here in Dallas, Texas, and I came from a pretty traditional family. My mother was a nurse. My father, he was a church leader, typical blue-collar worker, community man, neighborhood man. I heard people say it feels that your dad was my dad, so he was just sort of the community of that. So this is my family. I graduated from college, even here local in the Metroplex. Graduated from DeVry Institute of Technology, which is now called DeVry University. And I got a degree in biomedical technology. And basically that took me on a journey around the country. I was installing MRI and CAT scan systems. And so that introduced me, that was my engineer work, but it introduced me to people. When I saw people, but not in the light that I thought I'd be seeing people. Oftentimes I found myself coming into rooms, having to fix equipment where people were lying on their backs. They were sick in the MRI scans, CAT scans. Then after a period of time, I began to seemingly feel in the call to being service-oriented. So after a stint in the biomed field, I started my own service company, computer service company, where I went in and helped individuals to determine how to use computers to augment their business and assist with making their business more proficient, optimized, so to speak.
Let's talk about what your expectations were for the people. You said that you were interacting, or you saw people, but you didn't get the opportunity to interface with them to the degree that you wanted to. Is that correct?
No, actually, I had no intentions of interfacing with people because I got my degree in engineering. So I thought my life was going to be a guy in a lab figuring out how to design the most efficient and best way for machines to work. Or whatever it is I was going to be designing. But I chose the service route on a whim, and I say that because I had 2 job offers. One was taking me into a lab, working with, can't even remember the equipment, but the other one was taking me into a lab working with helicopters.
Well, that sounds exciting, honestly.
It was exciting for a 22-year-old, but even more excited than that, I went to this next interview, which was done in a hotel lobby. And they were offering company car, expense accounts, and
All the creature comforts.
all of the creature comforts. And they said to me, you don't have to be in an office every day. You can be remote at your home. We didn't have cell phones.
Way back before remote work was commonplace.
That's right. So that appealed to me. They said, they had one guy there. He said, Ben, tell him what you do every day. He said, I go to the bowling alley and bowl. And when something breaks, that they call me on my pager, I answer my pager, I go to work. So all the engineering in me went out the door, and I said, I'm taking this service job.
And that sounds like IT. Is it close?
It's close. So it required me to install and maintain computers. So that was the IT part, computers that operated and governed the MRI and CAT scan systems. Yes.
Fantastic. Let's talk about your life in Dallas, where you grew up. What was that like?
Yeah, so I grew up in, I guess what would be considered the inner city, but this was at a time when the inner city was more family-oriented and So I had a good life. I always tell people I had some of the best parents, some of the best neighbors, good friends. I stayed in the same schools from elementary.
Did any of those friends that you interacted with follow similar career trajectories as you, or did they disperse?
Yeah, disperse is an interesting way to put it. That's a diplomatic way to put it. And actually, a lot of my a career counselor at my junior high school suggested if I didn't leave my friends, my life wasn't going to be too rosy. And she mentioned the word electronics, and that caught my attention. So to answer your question, a lot of my friends, I've talked to friends that went to prison. I know some of them were killed. A couple of them were killed in our senior year of high school. So looking back in retrospect, I feel sort of blessed to have
You had the right intervention at the right moment.
navigated that circumstances and got into my career peak.
So you were saying that after a few years, you had a realization that you wanted to integrate a more purpose-centered approach.
Yeah, so that happened after I started my IT business, my computer business, which transformed into a digital creation business, and we call it a digital media business. And what happened is we received some money from some investors, and that allowed us to expand. We did a lot of things with that expansion. We toured with what people now call podcasting. We shot videos of shows. We shot full-length movies. That caught the attention of some of the news stations here. Channel 8 interviewed us, and that led to some recognition with the state of Texas. They asked us to come in and teach emerging businesses on what we did to go from zero to a fully functional, business. So we are always networking. One of our strategies was to show up in person and network. So individuals they were familiar with us because of the publicity we had gotten on television. So you asked, how did that get me into service? So here I am now teaching other entrepreneurs in terms of what we did to get business with the state. And as I was doing this, it occurred to me that I'm liking what I'm doing. I'm talking about, what it takes to be successful in business. But there was sort of an emptiness in that for me, and that everybody was trying to figure out how to make more money, make more money, make more money. And what I pretty much, after I started my business, what I was doing was always more centered on, it was more people-centered. What could I do for the good of the client that would better their life using the technology?
Your mom was a nurse and your dad was a leader in the church. Did those two fields, they both have something similar in common, the well-being of other people?
Yes.
Spiritual well-being and physical well-being. Did that factor into your decision-making process, do you think?
I really pride myself was going to be in my own person, but looking back, I could see the service oriented. They were service oriented. So I think I just saw individuals giving of themselves in service. So I think I just naturally flowed into that, which brings me to how did I segue from the training, I'll call it technical training with the state, into coaching. And during those training sessions, I wanted to incorporate more of the principles that I had been studying in my own life. I wanted to incorporate that into my training and to inform others that there was a way that you can incorporate your spiritual principles, your moral principles, your ethical principles into business. And so that's how I began. I had been studying the mystical arts, or the ancient wisdom path, for probably about 10 or 15 years at that time. And I just wanted to be able to share that and that inform people that they can incorporate it into doing business.
That is somewhat of a divergence from your religious upbringing,
Yes.
I would imagine. How did you come across that, if you don't mind?
No, I don't mind at all. Actually, I was out at a friend's art gallery, and I was working on her computers, and a gentleman walked in, and a gentleman that I had been wanting to meet from some time that I had seen on the news channel, and he was actually in the middle of he had prevailed in a lawsuit against the city of Dallas. He became my mentor, Roy Williams. And Roy, I asked him at that moment, how did he take on the city of Dallas and prevail in that lawsuit? He said, easy. I took it to the mountaintop. I take everything to the mountaintop.
That's profound.
Yeah.
Did you know what he meant at that point in time, or was it abstract?
It was very abstract. I'd heard Dr. King said that he had been to the mountaintop. So I asked him, what do you mean by that? And he told me, I take everything into meditation. At that point, I didn't know anything about meditation. So when he described what meditation was to me, I told him, oh yeah, I've been doing that. I've been laying in bed sometimes because I was working remote and I was going through a life crisis, life trauma. So I would lay in bed contemplating how I'm going to navigate through this trauma, this crisis situation. And it occurred to me I had somewhat been meditating, but I didn't call it that.
Intuitively, you were doing something.
Yeah. So when he named it, it made sense to me. And
Perfect.
yeah.
So that was your entry point.
That was my entry point. Yes.
That's remarkable. We'll come back to Roy a little bit later on. Let's talk a little bit more about you and some more of your influences. I get the impression that your work has taken you all across the world. What are some of the places that have left the deepest impressions on you? And by work, I mean your spiritual work and your day-to-day work.
Yeah, without question, Egypt. Yeah. When I think of Egypt, even now, as you're asking the question, I can still feel the impact of vibes.
It's on a lot of people's bucket lists, including mine. I'd love to go.
Yeah, as it should be. And it's my hope that I could start doing tours to Egypt to start taking people, because I went to Egypt and I actually had an opportunity to go inside of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, even to have an initiation there. And what happened over there, Wayne, is that as I was going through these pyramids, the Great being one of them, the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, and these temples I began to go through, I everywhere you go, you see carvings on the wall. And initially it's intriguing, but after a while it's exhausting. And so I started asking myself, I said, who did this? Why did these people take this laborious time to engrave and inscribe these, what we call hieroglyphs now? They didn't call them that. They call them sacred writings, which we know as Medu Neters. But why would they take the time with artisanal
Aestheticism?
Yes. Why would they do it? And that's the question I started asking myself. Why? And so when I left Egypt, I took a deep dive to figure out why they did that. And then when that answer came to me, it was even more amazing, because these people were showing the citizens of Egypt every day. They were giving them a map of the soul. And what these hieroglyphs, these Medu Neters are, they were basically inscriptions that reminded people daily on who they were and the different attributes of nature that they embodied in themselves. So as an example, I'll give you one of my favorites. We call them Anubis, but they call him Anpu. Anpu was a jackal. So the jackals in nature, they are the animals that go and they clean up when there's dead animals. But
A carrion feeder.
carrion feeder. But unlike other carrion feeders, they were able to take this rotted carrion and they were able to ingest. They came sometimes after the lions, but they were able to ingest rotted carrion and convert it into nutrients for their body.
That sounds very alchemical.
Exactly. And that's interesting you use that word. So they begin to be labeled the sort of the god of transformation, because aside from the vulture, no other animal could eat rotted carrion like that and turn it into something good.
So for the people who are not familiar with Anubis or Ampu, he's a psychopomp, right?
You'd have to, I'm familiar with the term, but I'm not familiar with that.
I believe it means one who guides the souls of the dead through the afterlife.
that's what Anubis is known for in pretty much the modern culture. But Anubis, again, he was titled the god of transformation because
Isn't that what death is, though?
that is what death is, the great transformation. So, and he had an interesting role in that he was there at the scene of the weighing of the heart. So your goal, if you knew you were going to meet Anubis, is to have your light, the weight of your heart is light as a feather. So that means you set out on a path to live right.
Live right.
Yes. So
It seems that you're not only doing your best to live right, as you put it, for yourself, but helping others to live right as well by your influence.
that's correct. That's correct. Another thing I want to say about, and so I'm going to take Anubis and I'm just going to say, so all of the Neteru, each of them had a different signification in terms of symbolism. And so, whereas we see signs on the street saying buy Coke, there you saw inscriptions saying, live according to natures.
And they were the influence for the Greek gods, correct?
Correct. And so consequently, I wanted to take these, incorporate them into my work to help individuals better understand themselves. But frankly, translating the ancient symbolism to modern day language so that everybody could understand it was a challenge.
I can well imagine.
Right. So, because they had thousands and thousands of these. So I chose the language of the archetypes, and I was able to translate some of the more prominent Neteru into archetypes. And that's what led me down this path of using archetypes as symbols to remind people of who they are inside.
I love it that you frame it that way. Not who they were, but who they are.
Who they are, yeah. Carl Jung also took that route. I later learned that he went to Egypt. He drew from the Neteru and formed the pantheon of archetypes. So,
A lot of people draw from that, whether or not they give credit to it, I don't know.
yeah.
That's for a different conversation.
Yes.
So we spoke a little bit about the divine archetypes. Your work with them seems to mirror your own inner evolution. Do individuals that you help need to be rooted in their own spiritual practice to benefit from what you do with Assure coaching? Or is it designed to meet people where they're at?
Yeah, it's definitely designed to meet people where they're at, because I'm working with my clients are individuals in the corporate world wanting to come out and pursue a work of passion. So no, what I do with the archetypes, and I've created my own. I've done with a tool called an assessment, where I sit a person down, and well, I don't have to sit them down now. They could go online and work with the assessment. Within an hour, they could gain insight into who they are, what field of study that they're more inclined to work within, where their heart is. And this is something that took me probably a few years to figure out with the archetype. But now, with my accessing your archetype tool, an individual could do it in an hour or so.
The beautiful thing about these principles is they're universal. So once you start explaining it to them, maybe if I frame it this way, are they able to grasp it easily with their religious background, because you can bridge the gap, so to speak? Or
Yeah.
of course, yes?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, certainly. As you know, with the spiritual principles, they're universal. So, as you just said, so they're powerful in and of themselves, despite the religious container. So, and even the Bible speaks of these. So Quran, they speak of various principles. The principle of reap and sow, for instance. So everybody's familiar with these.
Yes, sir. So let's get back to mentorship, which is a recurring thread in your personal story. What drew you to seek mentors? What drew you to seek mentors?
No, it's a great question. Actually, I think mentors, this has been a part of my journey. All along the way, I hear people saying they didn't have any strong men in their life, but I was fortunate, I suppose. I've always had strong men in my life and women. So anytime I run into a person, let me put it that way, gender aside, that had made some significant achievement, and I was doing something that I wanted to mirror, I would seek that person out and ask questions to see how did they get to where they were. And over time, I began to realize that this was a strength. This was a sort of a strategy for you.
It is. It's remarkable. Some people don't come to that realization until later on in life. Like
I guess I was lucky because the people, for instance, my grandfather was sort of like my first mentor. He was a farmer, my maternal grandfather. And him and his brother, they kind of taught me how to plant seeds. And I saw their farms and I saw my grandfather plow his farms. What I learned from that is how to be patient. I learned a lot about nature, and I learned that there was a process to everything. And they showed me how different seeds took different times to come.
so you learned a lot about cycles from
Exactly. Cycles of nature, processes, and patience.
decisions, yeah. All attributes of good business
Yes, exactly.
and good life.
Correct. So staying on the subject of mentors, then my uncle on my mother's side, well, he was I have to say my father first. Again, I talked about him. I watched that man study. He had books all over the table every Sunday morning study, and I was like, man, he's going deep with this for the Sunday school lesson. So I sort of picked up a study regimen from him, and the need to stay on top of, because no one could ask him any question in the church that he couldn't answer. So I was always impressed with that. So
He was duly prepared.
duly prepared, yes. So, and then my uncle, as I said, he was the businessman. He started any business that he put his mind to from scratch, and became pretty proficient with it. So
how has that influenced your leadership style?
So having mentors have basically informed me that, no man is an island unto himself. No matter how much you know, and we Leos tend to want to think that we could do it all, but no matter how much you know, it's great to seek counsel. And so particularly if you're having to make major decisions, and most of the time if you're in leadership, you're having to make major decisions.
Tell me about MentorNet. What's that?
Yeah, MentorNet is something I started. It was a digital, it was a PC video conferencing platform that I designed. Wow, way before Zoom never was thought about.
Wow.
And I used it to be able to work with mentees across town, so that you didn't have to drive over, because that was one of the challenges of having a mentor group, is that you have to drive over to the schools, and that's good when you could do it. But if you couldn't do it, we used PC video conference to reach them. So
You designed that?
I designed that.
Wow. So that's innovation.
Of course, and I at the time I had 2 software developers helping me with it. So I formed a nonprofit around that. But
That was your brainchild, though?
yes, it was my brainchild. Yes, it was.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it was given to me to set up a PC-based video conferencing mentor.
Going off tangentially, where do you think those ideas came from?
Well, we know where they come from.
Does the audience know where they come from?
Yeah, so for the audience, and that's a key question, because we get hunches from time to time, but the divinity is always speaking to us. Call it God, call it Allah, call it whatever you want to call it. Divinity is always speaking to us. Some people call it the ascended masters, but the universe is constructive in nature and has this tendency to want to improve and become better and evolve. And we're the little hands on earth to help that evolve in the physical form. So hunches are constantly given to individuals all the time. We just have to pay attention and listen to that small voice within.
Who are some of your personal mentors? I know you mentioned Roy. We can talk about his legend. Are there any others as well?
Yeah, aside from Roy, I have distant mentors who I did not form a personal relationship with, but I just sort of watched them in action. Steve Jobs was one of them. how he took Apple from, because I remember playing on the first Apple when I was in college, but I watched how he grew that company with the innovation and the artistry. Um, I've had other mentors in business. It's too many to mention. The late Sam Brown, he was the chairman of the Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce. He hired me in college to work for his alarm company.
Oh, wow.
Install security systems in people's houses and businesses. And this sort of introduced an inner city kid that grew up in Oak Cliff to the upper echelon aspect of society, particularly the African American community in Dallas. So everybody knew Sam because he secured their home. And when he brought this 20-something-year-old, maybe younger than that, to help him, then, it gave me a segue in. And so he became a mentor of mine. And actually, I work with him a lot at the Chamber of Commerce. Others, two individuals come to mind right now. One was he was actually a science advisor for 3 presidents. His name was Highland Lyon. He's passed away now, the late Highland Lyon. But Highland always challenged me with innovation, with forward-looking, forward-thinking. I met him in a Rotary. I was part of Rotary, Dallas Rotary Club.
Okay.
And the other individual that influenced me, he wasn't a direct mentor, but I would find myself in front of him at least 3 times a week. So I guess you could say, was a gentleman by the name of we call him Father Talib. His name was Albert Achilles Talavera, but we just, affectionate to us that knew him, we call him Father Taliber.
He's one of the hidden influences in Dallas in the metaphysical circles before my time. And from what I understand, he influenced your mentor, Roy.
Yes. Well, that was it. He was always, people thought he was telling Roy to be a troublemaker. He was telling Roy to keep making good trouble, Roy. Keep making good trouble down at the city hall. Give him hell, Roy, because he knew the work Roy was doing was transformational. So, but this guy, he introduced me to some of the deeper principles of metaphysics and the universal principles. And the fact that when I would sit in his lectures, there was not a question, no question anyone could ask him that he couldn't answer from a spiritual basis, a metaphysical basis, not just a religious basis, but a metaphysical basis. So that had a deep impact on me, that I knew that every life issue had a spiritual solution. Long before, I think Steve Covey said that, but long before Steve Covey said that, I knew that. So,
And then, well, you told me how Roy came into the picture. How did that relationship develop?
yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I met Roy. The next thing he told me to meet him at a bookstore, and he had me buy. He didn't show up to the bookstore till an hour later. He gave me a list of books. I purchased every book on the list, and then he came in a little late to the bookstore, and my stack doubled. And so as I'm reading all these books, I got to ask somebody questions. So at that time, Roy was hanging out at the Lamada Lands here in Dallas. He would have a lot of meetings there with city leaders, with community leaders. And so I was meeting all these people, and I was just amazed. I never forget Jerry Jones of the Cowboys walked in one day, and they were conversing like they knew each other. Everybody knew Roy. He was on the TV screens. So I became his driver. I would pick him up at 7-something in the morning. I had to drive way across town, maybe 30, 40 minutes, pick him up. And my job was such that I was working remotely at the time, because as long as the, I'm going to call it PET scanner, was positron emission tomography, my job was to keep it up and running 98%. So if it was up and running 88% of the time, I had 98% of my time to do what I needed to do during the day. So I would pick Roy up. You were going to say something?
That's a remarkable luxury.
Yeah. Again, I felt like the universe was at,
It was about to say, it was giving you an opportunity to do some immersion in this other,
yes,
this other field of expertise.
And it was during that time I was healing through a crisis in my life. So sitting at the table with Roy most of the day, and listening to him converse with other people about metaphysics, I was, gaining a deeper understanding. And then he introduced me actually to Father Tolliver. He said, let me take you over to this guy who speaks on metaphysics. So, yeah.
Well, I know Roy, and he was a very deeply spiritual person, but also very practical.
Yes, yes. So his work, as you know, spilled over into all of his social activism, his political activism. I would watch him at City Hall, and it was always amazing. His the way he understood the deeper concepts of politics, and it was a tougher individual dealing with Roy because he knew the truth, and
And he was a veteran as well, right?
yes, he was indeed. So he had paid his dues with his country and everything. So
What are some of his accomplishments?
Roy actually organized one of the first lunch counter sit-ins here during the late '60s for the civil rights movement.
Oh wow,
Yeah, so
I didn't know that one.
yeah, that's one of those that I guess he don't talk about a lot, but
He didn't talk about a lot. He was kind of just doing the work,
doing the work.
beating his own drum, or
Right. But so the interesting thing about Roy's story after that is he went out to play sports, but Roy's like 6'5", 6'6", maybe taller, but he had an injury, and so he just left for New York. And so here's the interesting thing was Roy was just a sort of a gambler, hustler, but when he came back to Dallas, he opened up I think he told me a nightclub gambling shack until an incident happened here where a kid got shot by the police.
oh no.
And that drew him into social activism. He shut down his club and went full time into that. So that's his pretty much. And
Everybody has a story.
yeah, and then he wrote a book about the history of Dallas. But yeah, everybody has a story. But after that, that's how I knew him as the political activist, social activist.
So your current venture with Archetypes is extremely compelling. Could you share how the seer, scholar, sage king, servant leader came to activate within you?
Yeah, so let me start out by saying, first of all, these same archetypes are in everyone. So mine was sort of a process of lived experience, some introspection and study about these archetypes. Then I began to recognize them in myself. For instance, we talked about my business. I always would get these ideas. So later I learned that that's the role of a seer. As far as the scholar, I'm a consummate student. I'm a lifelong learner. So, I mean,
You mentioned your relative having a slew of books on the table and him being an avid reader. Was that a
that was my father. So yeah, he had books and encyclopedias. So I grew up in a house with lots of books. So yeah, that's the scholar. And I was a decent student in school. I was on honor roll all the time. So the scholar was just an innate part of me. You talked about the servant leader, so to speak.
the sage king and servant leader?
Yes, let's talk about the sage king. Well, let's talk about the servant leader first, and I'll go back to the sage king because that came later. The servant leader was that, being the entrepreneur, being the business owner, having employees, having contractors work for you. You have to learn how to be a leader, a stern leader, but you have to learn how to be a servant leader. So that comes down to me not asking anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do. And so you lead by example. And
I'm familiar with that, having taught martial arts.
yeah.
I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything that I can't do personally.
Sure. Well, it really makes sense because you become a mirror and you let them know that it can be done. And so the servant leader was just that, being there for the employees, being there for my contractors, being there for the interns that would come to work for us. And ultimately, I talk about this in my life coaching and business coaching on how you form a team and everybody's a servant. Nevertheless, the servant's going to show up everywhere. Whether you're the CEO of the janitor, the servant's going to show up. So you talked about the sage king. So as I aged and began to contemplate this whole coaching thing and how I was going to use my wisdom to inform others and guide others, you know, the concept of the sage came to light and awakened in me, and I had to own this thing. And
I was about to say, you have to claim it.
you have to claim it because here's an interesting thing, and I don't know if you've experienced, but sometimes and I hear the word now, this thing called imposter syndrome. So there were times when I felt like maybe because I was told when I was younger, you're too young to be doing this. But as I began to move through society, there was times I questioned myself in terms of what I knew, or if I was worthy of talking about certain subjects.
I don't know where the term came from. It didn't seem to bother previous innovators and successful industry leaders. I hear people like with Ruben talk about his lack of technical expertise in this or that, but then he goes on to have successful multi-million-dollar kits. And it's like that across the board, right? And sometimes you just have to do the thing.
Right. Own it first.
Hold it first.
And know that's you, and that's the confidence, and then do it.
Do it.
So here's how the king comes into play with this. Recently, and this happened right around COVID, I got very disillusioned with what I saw around me in terms of society. And I've asked myself, how do we get to 2020 and have a global failure? Who are the leaders? Who's guiding this society? And then I asked myself, well, what will you tell your grandkids you did during that time? And so it occurred to me, I'm going to have to step up and take a more rounded role in helping to shape society, so to speak.
If we're throwing out euphemisms, be the change is pretty much what you...
Be the change you want to see in the world. So Wayne, talk about how things come to me. So this concept came to me of creating a online digital business ecosystem. And I fought it for a while. I'm like, that's too much, but it wouldn't go away. It kept coming in my mind. And then this whole thing called blockchain came around. And then this whole thing called digital currency had been around. But all the pieces were coming together in how to bring this digital ecosystem to fruition. And so I said, okay, I'm going to have to embrace this thing because it's not going away. It's not leaving my mind. And so, so I asked myself, what is my role in this thing? And I said, well, you're going to have to be the leader of it. You're going to have to be the symbolic, euphemistic king of the thing. And it has nothing to do with the Leo in me. It's just that one of the gifts of the king is the gift of humanity. Another gift of the king is the gift of responsibility.
Sometimes when there's a vacancy or a void, somebody has to take the initiative to step up.
Correct.
That is leadership.
Yes.
Would that be an attribute of being a king, to be the first to champion the cause, take the initiative and lead, and know when to pass the baton?
That is exactly one of the primary attributes of the king. And believe it or not, another attribute of the king is humility. I mean, you have to know, you can't go out, and that's pompousness doesn't serve in being the leader in that role. But I was sharing with my wife recently that you asked, and I don't know if you've asked me this, but we were talking about archetypes, and in my archetypes, I focus on the positive archetypes, the constructive archetypes, but we also know that one of the dark aspects of a king can become a tyrant. And I don't have to say much about that one now. We're seeing that play out in real time. This is just a fact. So there's great responsibility that comes along with that archetype. So it's not an ego thing. It's just more of a responsibility thing, knowing that, you have to create something, and that's going to affect a lot of people's lives.
Is there a number of archetypes in your system, a specific number?
So in my system, I started out with 144 archetypes. And again, these were essentially principles of nature. But what I did with that is I weeded out the more, I want to call them the egoic archetypes. And for instance, I took the tyrant out. It is an archetype, but I took it out. I took the clown out, and these are, although I used the clown in a writing when I was memorializing my brother, because it occurred to me that the clown was the person that brought cheer into a very odd situation, and he was one of those individuals that always brought cheer to the room. So there's a song of a fellow friend and frater of ours that's it's called "Where Are the Clowns?" Bringing the Clowns. It's a classic, and so you have archetypes like that.
It sounds a lot like the divine fool.
Yes,
In folklore, we have things like Anansi, we have things like Brer Rabbit.
yes, all of these archetypes.
We have deities like Baba Legba, that embody some of these traits.
Yeah.
So it can be used for benefic purposes.
Sure. Well, I know you are a master of the tarot.
I would throw that that term. I'm a student.
You're a student of the tarot, so you know well that archetypes are through there, all through the tarot. So the Emperor, the Hangman, and so there's some correlation there. The key with the archetypes, and I mentioned 144, and so I pretty much halved that and narrowed it down to about initially 70, and then I got it down to 49 creation archetypes. And where that came from is I developed 7 major archetypes, and up under that 7, one archetype to meet each of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs level. Abraham Maslow talked about 5. I added the 2 that he didn't really talk about much, but that were included in his work. And though one of them is aesthetics, and that's the need to have beauty and harmony in your life and in other people's lives. And the last one was the one called transcendence. And that's the need to help others to become their best. You become, because he reached a level of what's called individuation, and that's up to self-actualization. And maybe they're right there. But then beyond that, when you've done that for yourself, you now have a need to help others do likewise, and that's individuation. So that's the 5 levers, the physical level, the safety and security level, the needing to belonging level, the loving belonging level. Above that, I think it's the self-esteem, then the self actualization. As I said, I think those are 5, and then the other 2 I just named. So I have an archetype for each of the 7 under each of the main archetypes, if that makes sense. So
The logo, it looks very Kabbalistic.
okay.
Are there any, am I just imagining things, or is there some kind of correlation between these principles and Kabbalah?
So because Kabbalah's principles are based in universal principles, the answer to your question is yes. Because the logo is a universal, it embodies universal principles. One, the logo in the 2-dimensional format, as you see it, it shows how 7 and only 7 perfect circles could fit within a perfect circle in the 2D format. Now, if we were to carry that over to 3D format, the number and 7 is the number of perfection in the spiritual realm. But interestingly enough, if we take those 7 circles you see in the logo, they become 12 when they become a sphere in the 3-dimensional, and only 12 spheres could fit equidistance within a greater sphere. And so what that informs us is that if we're trying to create a perfect society, we need to think about 12 domains, and we need to perfect those 12 domains. And so this is all ancient wisdom. And the flower of life, you've seen that. You've seen that the logo in 3D format. It looks like the flower, like the seed of the flower of life.
And also similar to a Metatron cube.
The Metatron cube, exactly, yes. And the interesting thing, I had not thought about the Metatron cube until I drew my logo from the 7 archetypes. And I wanted to add color to signify the chakras and how they correlate with our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of Maslow's needs. So that's how the colors got into the logo. Back to the correlation, 12 happens to be the perfect divider on the physical plane. So it's counterintuitive because you would think the 2D would represent the physical plane and the 3D would represent the spiritual plane. But as I'm saying it out loud, perhaps not. 3D is certainly indicative of the physical plane.
So it seems like you're also incorporating some of your technical wizardry.
Well, technical wizardry, or as we call it, sacred geometry, because incorporated into my work is all of the principles, including sacred geometry. What I learned in nature is that nature unfolds perfectly. So if we emulate it to the degree that we can emulate our creations and align them with nature through sacred geometry, we'll be more successful.
How do you bridge practicality with the visionary purpose of your work?
Yes, so that's the perfect question, because I fell in love with metaphysics. I did a very deep dive, but now the question is, how do I carry this over into entrepreneurship and business? And so what I do is I let the principles inform me. They are the foundation, the backbone of all my decisions. One of the things I know, and it helped me early on that I majored in engineering, because there's sort of two types of engineers. I'm gonna say that. One is the theoretical engineer, and that guy or gal sits in the lab and they use theory and all of the principles and they design something on paper, and now it's got to work. And this was my training at DeVry. So I chose the other side of engineering where I understood, and I'm part of the design team, but now I got to take it out into the field.
Is that applied?
And it's applied engineering, and it's practical, so you have to make it work.
Okay.
So yes, it's applied. And so you asked the question of using the word practical. I think you used practicality. So applied spirituality into our daily lives, into the business world. That's how we ground those principles in doing the practical work. And ultimately we call that service to humanity. And that's where it all comes together. So
for those new to Assure Coaching, is it a curriculum-based system, or does it operate more like a spiritual diagnostics and guidance session?
So it started out more of spiritual diagnostics and guidance. That's when I was doing one-on-one coaching more. But ultimately, I wanted to scale. And so when you're scaling, you have to systematize things. So what I've done now is turned it into a curriculum-based, online, sort of self-paced coaching curriculum-based system. So yeah.
What does a typical engagement look like?
Yeah, so right now the typical engagement is for one to start out by taking the assessment.
Okay.
And the assessment is sort of a baseline. It kind of grounds you, centers you on informing you of who you are.
How does a person take the assessment?
Thank you for asking that. You go to my website,
Which is?
assurecoaching.online.
Assurecoaching.online.
.online.
Okay.
Yeah. So go to that website, click on the assessment button, take the assessment, and that'll send a message to me that someone wants to have an engagement, because Typically, I offer, well, you have options. You could take the assessment and self analyze it, or you can get a session with me to go through it with you. So that's the initial part of the engagement. And from there, I take people through a 7-step process. From that assessment, we helped you determine what your passions are, what you're excited about, what resonates and what excites you. And once we determine what excites you, we sort of turn that into what we call a social value proposition. And this is what you want to do for society. This is the work you want to give back to society. And from that, we monetize that into a business model. And once we monetize it, once we create a business model, then we can scale it. Then we could turn it into a full-fledged money-making business.
You're doing very valuable work with that.
Yeah, it's even more so valuable now with so many people being displaced.
Right.
And so, I've been working on this for some time, but I had no idea we'd reach a day where, hundreds and thousands of people in a month's time is being displaced. So my excitement now is that I can come to people and say, don't worry about that. You have everything. You are a walking, living enterprise. And I talked about this in my first unpublished book. But you are a walking, living enterprise. And what we could do with that is just give people the confidence to know how to show up and what service that they are best equipped to provide to society and monetize it. Yeah.
What are some of the fears people have? Is it technology? Is it kowtowing to corporate dictates? Or
the interesting thing, those may come along later. The first fear that people have is the fear of letting go of the habitual thing that has become so familiar to them, and that's our career that we have become, that we may be displaced in. So just having the courage to pivot, to explore another aspect of yourself, because there are many dynamics to each of us.
I can imagine that would be very scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's what archetypes come in. Once we show people that you're more dynamic than one person, one role in society, then that frees them up. And then once we ground them in that, not only you are more you're more dynamic than that, you actually have gifts. Because each of the archetypes, this is what I haven't talked about, each of the archetypes have specific gifts associated with them.
No doubt.
Like, go ahead.
I was about to say, this whole process, it sounds very initiatic.
It is. Yeah, I had never thought about it that way, but it is. It's certainly a sort of a self-initiatory process, because what it does is grounds you in, like the warrior, the gift of courage. The sage, the gift of wisdom, the artisan, the gift of creation. But for instance, people don't know the warrior also had the gift of resolve, the gift of focus. You see how dynamic each of the archetypes are?
Absolutely.
So through the accessing the archetype tool, we talk through that, and we work. And when you emerge from that, you emerge knowing so much more about yourself, and now you're more confident and you're more courageous. You got more clarity, and now you're more confident to try something new, and you have the courage to, or else I helped you with the courage to step out into the world to do something different that's going to be beneficial to humanity.
What would you have to say to somebody who is very interested about taking the next step in activating their life?
So what I would say to them is, don't be afraid to look within yourself and consider that you have other opportunities, other potentials, hidden potentials. So that's number one. Number two, don't be afraid of walking away from something that you're vested in that may have become rote to you and no longer serve you in terms of fulfillment. That's number two. And the third one is, I don't want to say dispense with the fear, but let's talk about the fear, because we have to alchemically mitigate the fear. Because as a coach, what I know until you know yourself, what I know is that every human on this planet has the innate ability to offer something of value to humanity that will be seen of value, and ultimately that they could be compensated for. So I would say just go to assurecoaching.online and start the engagement process. Take the assessment, reach out to me, send me an email. So that's what I would say to individuals, Wayne, that may have some trepidations about, taking the next step.
Thank you, Henry. And thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful process of doing this interview. I'm looking forward to getting this message out there, and I wish you nothing but success for Assure Coaching and your personal endeavors. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Wayne. I want to thank you for being persistent, because you've asked me once or twice to do this interview. I didn't think I had everything ready in terms of my services, my products. So I want to thank you wholeheartedly for being persistent and making this happen today. So thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, Wayne.
All right.